This bill before you is a combination of effort between myself and the Vice Chair of the committee, Myra Crownover, Mr. Gaddis, who had some good ideas, and Mr. Turner, who also had a bill, and Mr. Coleman. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's a long bill. Hopefully, if you looked at it, we have a few amendments. Basically, we're expanding boards, giving the auditor additional authority, giving the inspector general's additional authority, creating a Recovery Act Accountability Board, and hopefully that will be the primary engine to make sure that we have no overlap, that we spend this money efficiently, and we do not waste the taxpayer money. There are a couple of amendments.
Mr. Speaker,
For what purpose?
I have a messenger from the Senate at the door of the House.
Lovely.
Mr. Speaker, I'm directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate is taking the following action.
Thank you. Chair lays out the amendment. The following amendment will be read by the clerk. Is this Dunham's? It's yours, Jim.
You're good. Yeah, thank you.
Amendment by Dunham.
Chair recognizes Mr. Dunham to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All this does is make the effective date correct. There was an error in the effective date. It becomes effective this year.
Mr. Dunham offers up an amendment. It's acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? Chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. Chair lays out the amendment. The clerk will please read the amendment. Oh, okay.
Amendment by Hughes.
Chair recognizes Mr. Hughes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment is congruent with transparency measures we've applied to state government. This would apply to the 15 largest counties in Texas. The bill was passed unanimously out of county affairs. There's an amendment to the amendment.
Chair lays out the amendment to the amendment. The clerk will read the amendment to the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment by Hughes.
Mr. Hughes will tell us the next song.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment to the amendment tightens up the amendment and makes sure it fits in the purpose of the bill. It's acceptable to the author of the amendment, and I move adoption.
Mr. Hughes offers up an amendment to the amendment. Is acceptable. Is acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Chair recognizes Mr. Hughes to explain his amendment as amended.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Madden, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for a quick question?
Mr. Hughes, would you yield for a quick question?
Of course I'll
Brian,
yield.
how does your amendment affect a county that does not have a county treasurer that's over 250,000 people?
The amendment is drafted applies to counties over 250,000 people that are accepting stimulus funds and subject to audit by the state auditor.
Right.
And they would be required to put their expenditures, make them transparent, just like state government does, just like Collin County already does.
Okay.
This is
I'm
what
just questioning what happens if you don't have a county treasurer.
I don't believe there's no distinction in my amendment as to whether you have a treasurer or not. Collin County is doing what we're asking to be done, and it's acceptable to the author. I move adoption of the amendment.
Mr. Hughes sends up an amendment as amended. It's acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. Chair lays out the amendment. The clerk will please read the amendment. Mr. Gaddis. Clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Gaddis.
Chair recognizes Mr. Gaddis to explain his amendment.
Yeah, it's acceptable, so just
Yeah.
whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this does is we worked extensively on an OIG bill along with Mr. Dunham, and a lot of us came together. This is the compromise that came out of the State Affairs Committee and was voted out, and we're putting that in this bill in replace of the current OIG language that's in there. I believe it's acceptable.
Mr. Gaddis offers up an amendment. It's acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. Is anyone wishing to speak for or against House Bill 2942? Seeing no one, the chair recognizes Mr. Dunham to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, most of y'all did not have the opportunity to come in front of the Stimulus Committee this year. I just want you to know that they did a lot of hard work, and this bill is thanks in much to the committee staff, which most of y'all didn't get to meet. Chelsea and Valerie, and most of all, Leslie Lemon and Zach Evans, who are over here, and I want to thank Leslie for agreeing to come back and work for the state for me.
Would the gentleman yield?
Mr. Dunham, would you yield for Mr. Phillips's questions?
Yes.
Thank you. And just real quick,
what you're doing is putting a fence around the money that was received and making sure that it's spent the way it's intended to by the legislature and in accordance with federal law. Is that correct?
And also, as importantly, putting a magnifying glass on how it's spent so that you will know how it's spent and not read about it in the newspaper, hopefully.
And to make sure, and you're changing the name of the legislative auditor to the, there's some name changes. I just want to make sure what I need to.
It becomes the State Accountability Office and State Auditor.
Okay. And also, just to make clear, there's nothing in here that requires the state to be obligated to take any stimulus funds.
No.
And is not obligated us to spend tax dollars to get these funds.
Correct. This bill is entirely monitoring, transparency, accountability for the money that is spent. It does not require the expenditure of any funds or acceptance of any funds from Washington.
So when we go back home and someone says, well, what'd y'all do with that $16 billion? We're going to be able to say, let's take you to this place. We're going to show you what's going on. And the money that was received was spent this way. And we can be assure them back home because of the work that your committee's done and through this legislation that money's spending for intended purpose without and do disservice to our taxpayers.
That's correct, and we are giving the auditor additional authority so that he has asked for and that he agrees would help him in making sure that this money is properly spent.
Thank you.
Move adoption.
He's right there. Okay. Anyone wishing to speak for or against House Bill 29, I apologize. Yeah, Mr. Dunham is closed and move passage. Members, the question occurs on passage of third reading, House Bill 2942. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes clearly have it. House Bill 2942 has been passed to third reading.